Good morning, Hub City kids. How are you doing today? I want you to take a minute to think about some good things that happened to you this week. Today is a Memorial Day weekend, so hopefully you just had a fun weekend and you have some barbecues that you went to today, or you went camping, or did something super fun that you can be grateful for. So take a minute and do that. And who remembers what book we have been talking about? Mark. And say it with me. Where is it? Old Testament, New Testament? New Testament. Where is it? Ready? Matthew, Mark. So it's book number 2 in the New Testament. And we have talked about how this shows us that Jesus is the authority because he is the author. He is the creator of this world. He is the creator of this story. And so he has the authority to speak into it and to be listened to and followed. We've also talked about how he is the king. He is the true king, the good king, the better king, and the unexpected king. He does things in different ways than we would think a king should operate or would operate. And he does all sorts of things that show us that he is better than all the earthly kings here. He doesn't have a fancy palace. He doesn't have servants that follow him around and do all of his whims. He isn't disconnected from the people. Like normally a king is in his palace and he just talks with his noblemen and his advisors, and he doesn't hang out with the common folk. But that's not what Jesus does. Jesus does he hangs out with everybody, but he especially hangs out with the people that nobody else wants to hang out with. Nobody that what we think of as a good king would ever spend time with. And Jesus heals people. He spends time with the unclean people, the people who are sick and who are outcasts. And Jesus loves all of them and is the king of all of them. So he's super powerful and unexpected, right? So today we are going to read this next section in Mark, and it's one that I really, really love, and I'm super excited to talk about with you. So stand with me. We're going to read John 4:35 through 41. On that day, when evening had come, he said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd, they took him with them in a boat, just as he was, and other boats were with him. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking into the boat so that the boat was already filling. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" And he awoke and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. He said to them, "Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great fear and said to one another, "Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" Ready? Pause. I couldn't come up with anything funny. That was my last face ever. Did you know that? This is our last video because we're starting Hub Kids up next week. And that was my crazy face. Oh well, I'm out of ideas. So what happened in this passage? Jesus needed a break from all of the crowds of people who are following him around everywhere. And he says, "Let's go get in a boat." And then what does he do? He falls asleep. I love that he falls asleep and that he needed some space from all of these people, because it shows us just how human Jesus is. He is a man just like us who needs to sleep and needs to eat and gets overwhelmed and tired. And so he's passed out in the back of the boat. And what happens? There is a storm, a terrible, huge, powerful storm. And remember, some of Jesus' disciples were fishermen. They spent their whole lives on the sea, probably even this sea. And they knew the water, they knew the boat, they knew how to take care of themselves, but they also knew how dangerous it was. They probably all had friends who had a shipwreck and died in this very sea. And so the water is coming up over the sides of the boat, and the wind is howling, and the sails are flapping everywhere, and they are terrified. They come to Jesus, and they're like, "What are you doing? Why are you sleeping? We're dying out here. Like, our lives are in jeopardy. How can you be asleep?" And what does Jesus say? He gets up and he rebukes the wind and the waves. Have you heard of that word before? Rebukes. Rebukes is what your parents do to you when you don't clean your room or you do something wrong. They say, "You need to fix that. You are not doing that the right way," or whatever. They're reprimanding you. They're telling you what you are doing that was not okay. And this is Jesus, who is speaking to the wind and the waves like a father would do or a mother would do to their child. To the wind and the waves. How amazing is that? Jesus can do that because he is the author of the wind and the waves. He is totally in control of the wind and the waves. And he says, "Peace, be still." And what happens? Immediately, everything is calm. That in itself is exceptional, and clearly only God could do something like this. But it also reminds me of my all-time favorite psalm, Psalm 46. If you have time, you should read it because it's kind of like this. And it's somebody who is sitting on a picture like a rock in the middle of the ocean, and their same situation. There's waves crashing. It's talking about the ground literally falling into the water. There is terrifying chaos everywhere. And Jesus says to that person, "Peace, be still, and know that I am God." Just hold still in the middle of all of that craziness. Jesus is saying this to the wind and the waves, but there's a sense of that he's also telling it to the people too, right? Just be calm and know that I'm here. I am in control. And he says to his disciples afterwards, "Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great fear and said to one another, "Who is this guy? He can control the wind and the waves?" I know when I read this, sometimes I'm a little bit shocked, at the disciples, because they have seen Jesus do all of these things, and yet they're completely surprised and flabbergasted. Isn't that a great word? Flabbergasted that Jesus could control the wind and the waves. But I also kind of feel for them, because I know there have been so many times in my life where I have been scared or worried or nervous, and my response is to do something about it. I try and fix that, like the story last week with Eustace. We need Jesus to be the one to put his talon into our skin and pull away the dragon skin. It can only be Jesus. And it doesn't matter how many times we see him do amazing, miraculous things, and how many times we know he's taking care of us, and we still are like these disciples and immediately alert. "God, what are you thinking? Why aren't you taking care of me?" And we forget that he is a king that is so powerful that he is also the king of the wind and the waves. So I understand the disciples a little bit, and it makes me sad that I am. But also, this is that human moment of Jesus. He's asleep. That's crazy. And I think sometimes we think that Jesus is asleep and not watching over us. But just because he was having a human moment over there, does that mean he was not in control? Does Jesus ever fully sleep on the job? No. He knew that he was in control and that they didn't have to worry. It was them that needed to learn that lesson. So what kind of king does this say about Jesus? What kind of king is Jesus in this? He's sitting in a boat, not a fancy boat, but an ordinary boat with ordinary men. He is a king who is human and needs to sleep, but also a king who is in command of nature. He is a king who is worthy of our trust. That's a huge one. He is worthy of our trust because there's nothing he can't do. There is no problem that you have that is too big for him. Just imagine if there's somebody on the playground. Do playgrounds exist anymore? Who is mean to you all the time and it makes your heart sad? Is that something that's beyond Jesus' ability to take care of you? No. He can tell the wind to immediately stop and it stops. He can take care of you too. All of your worries, it doesn't matter how small they are or how big they are. He loves you enough to take care of them. He is in control. Is trusting him always an easy thing to do? Nope. Even the men who saw with their own eyes Jesus heal people over and over again, he cast out demons, and we haven't got to this yet, so spoiler alert, but he even brings people back from the dead. It still didn't cross their minds that he could stop the storm. What does this teach us about us? We don't always get it. Especially not right away. It takes practice to trust in Jesus. It takes a lot of really, really hard things and lots of chances for us to trust in Jesus before we try and do things on our own. Did you know that the Bible says trials, hard things that happen in our life, they're actually a way that we can grow closer to him? Jesus uses even really hard things that happen so that we can trust him more. Those are little opportunities for us to practice trusting in him. What does this teach us about Jesus? He loves us anyway, despite all of our failures, despite when we forget, he still loves us. He's ridiculously patient with us. Every time we stumble and forget and cry in the storm, Jesus is capable of taking care of us, and he loves us. He loves us so much that he gave his life for us. That's pretty crazy. And what do we have to do in return? We can't earn it. We can't buy it. All we have to do is trust in him. All we have to do is have that moment of saying, Jesus, help me. And he always will. That is the best news ever. And slightly good, less best news, also good news, is I will see you hopefully next week. This is our very last Hub Kids video, and we are going to be meeting here in person next week, June 4th, June 6th. I think it's June 6th. And I'm so very excited about it. Have a great week, and I'll see you next week.